State. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.
Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. I am your host, Too Black. Today, I want to start out a little bit differently than how we typically start episodes. We do have a Patreon. I take the blame for this. I'm not the best at promoting it or shouting it out. It is, if you listen to this on the audio side, there is a quick little primer at the beginning that asks for a donation, but we want to start something new where we actually state to people who have signed up for our Patreon. Just make this very brief. I don't want to make this the center of the show, obviously. So we want to shout out our patrons. I learned this by being on Last Dope Intellectual, that this does help to seem to just make people feel like they can feel more involved. Patrons for this past month, Prudent Penguin and Evan Wright. So just want to shout them out, and we're going to begin doing this moving forward, shouting out our patrons every month who have signed up. So again, you can sign up for as low as $1 if you would like, and you could give as much money as you would like as well. The costs just go towards like helping with production costs, helping with just research time, whether we need to acquire certain books or certain materials, sometimes even traveling to get information. So any of that could be helpful. At just the general labor that we put into the show, we appreciate it. We're not trying to make this our jobs or anything, but anything would be helpful. Anyway, so today's myth is the system is broken. We're going to be speaking with a assistant professor of Africana Studies at Knox College, Dr. Yannick Marshall. If you all remember, for those who have been fans or who've been listeners to the show for a while, when we did the myth that Black people died to vote, he was on part 2 of that series. That was back in probably 2020. Yeah. So yeah, 2020, I believe, maybe August or September, somewhere around that time. We did the myth Black people died to vote, and he was on in part 2, and he really gave us a great anti-colonial perspective. So we brought him back today for this episode. It's going to be a 2-parter. To discuss this myth that the system is broken. So he has an article that is called A Short Dictionary of Liberal Language on Policing that is published in Al Jazeera, and that will obviously be linked in the show notes. And he goes through 15 different terms that are used to reify the state and reify this idea that the system somehow can work or it can be reformed or something of that nature. So we're going to go through all 15 of those words, the philosophical and ideological function that these terms and other terms serve in continuing to produce this idea that there is some good thing at the core of this situation that we're in, at the core of the colony, that can be rebuilt to work for us, as opposed to just being removed and we do something different. So just want to give a little bit of framing, and then we're going to get into the interview, and the interview is me and Ryan. And then next month, the whole cast will be back. So typically when you hear this phrase of the system is broken, you often hear this a lot from politicians.
Among his remarks, Mr. Biden says the political system is broken, blaming gerrymandering and outlandish campaign contributions for strong division between parties.
It is time to heed the call of business leaders, labor leaders, faith leaders, law enforcement, and fix our broken immigration system.
But we had a broken military, we had a depleted military.
Because of me, everyone now sees that the Republican primary system is totally rigged and broken.
Mr. President, our criminal justice system is broken, and we need major reforms in that system.
What's implied with this statement is that these systems, or the system, is supposed to work for the people, but it's somehow failing, as in it's not living up to its creed or something. This is what you hear a lot when people want to talk about America. So usually this is blamed on corruption or some kind of dysfunction that needs to be fixed to improve the supposed goal. But when we study the origins of these systems, there's nothing that appears in the history of them that says they were built to work for the people in the first place. Instead, what exists between these so-called systems is the state. As a friend of the show, Dr. Rasul Mawat notes, there is no system, only the state, end quote. In his book, which he's been on the show to discuss, Geography is a Threat and the Production of Violence, the State and the City Between Us, he defines the state as, quote, the configuration of the power of government, corporate interests, classes of elites, upper levels of bureaucratic management class that implements the ruling class's goals and aims on top of an accumulated base, end quote. So the capitalist state creates systems that serve the goals and aims of the ruling class to maintain and control and accumulate capital. So once these systems no longer serve their interests, they are dissolved for new systems that do. That is to say that the system of Jim Crow or slavery weren't abolished because they were broken, but because they no longer serve the interests of the ruling class. Under the guise of the state, the system is only broken when it deviates away from their goals as in the ruling class's goals. Sometimes black people can resist the system the state creates, but not the state itself. As in, we can struggle for the end of direct colonialism, but then the state replaces it with the system of neocolonialism. We can defeat Jim Crow only for mass incarceration to rise afterwards. This is not to endorse the flawed idea that mass incarceration is the new Jim Crow, but to say that the state will create new systems when the former ones are no longer necessary to their interests. The state apparatus that puts these systems in motion must be seized and ultimately withered away to be quote-unquote broken. What is put in place to ensure that this never happens is an ideology that always seems to reinforce the state. One of the key ways of making this happen is through language. Language has a way of framing the world for us that serves as a guiding logic. When language is framed in a way of the capitalist state, it can reify the things that harm us while posing as a liberation front. So today we want to sit down with a scholar who studies this phenomena so we can understand how the ideology and language of the state reorientate our rebellious ambitions against us. Only when we understand this process can we actually work to create and break the system, quote unquote, and the capitalist state that produces it. All right, so thank you, Dr. Yannick, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Like we noted before, you were here on the Black People Died to Vote Part 2 episode. Added a great dynamic. We actually didn't have a guest for that episode, and you and I were just talking, and I was like, yo, come through. So that worked out well. And I always tell people, I still say this shit when you treat voting like whether you're going to go to work on Tuesday or not. I still,
Right.
I still say that to people, kind of is what it is, but move on. So as we know, that you wrote a piece on a short dictionary of liberal language on policing. So we want to use this piece as a way to kind of debunk this myth of when people say the system is broken. And as we talk about, if we have the state sets up its own system, so the state sustains itself beyond any one particular system. So people get caught up on whether the system was built this way or not this way. Like the state is always going to protect itself, so it will dissolve the system and create another one and just keep going until it's dealt with. So we want to think about this since the police are an extension of the state. To your piece, and the people are often not just responding to the police as individuals, but the violence of the state, the monopoly that they have on violence. We want to go through these terms. So you have 15 terms. I want to read these terms. I want to get your kind of general idea of what you were thinking, and we can go through them individually. So yeah, we're doing 15 terms. So people who, if this is one of them, if you think you're gonna get a real short episode, this ain't that. So if y'all want to leave, I'm giving y'all a chance. Whoever's listening, if you want to stick around. So we're going through 15 terms of, again, liberal language on policing, or just language that's used to just reify the state. So he's got broken, begin to, both sides, change, deterrence, fear for his life, flawed or imperfect, healing, held accountable, know his heart. Some of these I can't help laughing. Legacy, peace or peaceful, reform, supposed to, and tragic. So 15 different terms, and I'll give you the floor to just speak on kind of what brought you to write this piece. I know you were saying this, you really could write more, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think this piece is just a culmination of my general dissatisfaction with how the ways in which we speak about racism, policing, violence, etc., are mediated by ideology and through police or state ideology. So we end up being just as the police officer uses their baton and gun to protect the elite and the bourgeoisie's property away from the colonized, the proletariat, the slumber proletariat, etc. Ideology works the same way, except much more sophisticated. It is the baton, it is that form, that gun, that repression, because it keeps the colonized away from the actual material reality that exists. It's a way to push people aside. So instead of just being face to face with exactly what exists, you are prevented. There's the barrier that is set up, and that is through language, through ideas, through the way that things are presented. And so if we are going to be getting out of this position at all, it's not just the police repression that is the problem. In fact, that is not even the main problem. The main problem is the way our thinking has been ordered in such a way to be able to protect the property of the colonists, whether it is the material property of capital or the actual state, the territory itself, that fiction of land that it possesses. And so for us to be able to deal with that, we would have to undo these words and languages and terms that are used that have no other purpose other than to put us in a position where we continuously are chasing decoys rather than the actual goal of the war, basically, which is to get on the other side and capture the flag.
Right. So, yeah, that's well put, especially thinking about like how it's a barrier that stands in the way from it stands in the way of the material, and it's just there's a constant ideology functions as a way of like rerouting people somewhere else, as well as the way that material interests get situated where you feel like, oh God, I gotta protect this because this is the little thing that I have, and if they take this from me, then I'm gonna lose my family or whatever. So you feel like you gotta protect those interests, So yeah, a lot of times our interests are tied to the maintenance of the state. At least that's how it appears to be.
Yeah, you even hear a lot of that language when riots happen. They're more concerned with property being damaged than actual people.
Yeah. It's a long game of moving goalposts. In fact, just moving the entire net, so that we continuously just should be shooting at the exact wrong goal. And then sometimes we go around claiming that there has been some progress made, when the actual victory, the actual game is never won because we don't even know where the goal is. So if you're able to not only just be attacking your rival team, but you're actually able to hide the goal and put false goals in the way, then what's going to end up happening is that your rival is continuously going to be aiming at things that have nothing to do with you, and you can sit down, drink coffee, look at the ocean, and let them celebrate their victories of scoring on nothing. That's literally what's happening.
I mean, I call it the visual. I call it the visual. That's why that's funny, but it's not. But
you're just going around in circles chasing your own.
Yeah, I mean, you just watch. It's like watching. It's like watching dogs play or something. I mean, I hate to think about it like that. Like you just,
Except we celebrate much more than the dogs. We wag our tails much more than the dogs. We're celebrating on our highlights, dancing like the bear in the circus, saying, "This is it. We've made it." And maybe next day is going to be tomorrow. The dog is much wiser.
Yeah.
The dog is much wiser. The dog is chilling. The dog is relaxing. The dog is performing his little wagging of the tail, but that's it. That's where it ends. We're sitting down thinking, writing books about what we've done.
Hey, let's get it.
This system throw me a bone today. I'm gonna write a whole dissertation.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm gonna write a dissertation about the bone, like there's meat on it. Yeah,
right.
And it's not even a bone.
Meat.
It's not even a bone.
Yeah, it's not even a real bone. Yeah. All right. So yeah, the first term we're gonna read quotes. We can just go back and forth on it, right? But we'll read quotes. So, This one I actually moved to the top since it's in our since it's in the myth. The system is broken. I think you put them in alphabetical order to play off of it being a literal dictionary. But you said so this is broken, and I'm gonna read two quotes from here. You said the justice system is broken suggests that, or when people say the justice system is broken, suggests that there was a time other than the time of discriminatory juries, disparate racial sentencing, courts overruled by mobs, prison plantation labor, mass imprisonment, or rush executions, end quote. And then secondly, or later on in this definition, you say, but the persistence of white boots upon black necks is not due to a paucity of ideas. Black people have thought, have written and spoken enough, providing in over 4 centuries sufficient demands, programs, and a variety of philosophical outlooks that, if any were adopted, would go far to alleviate and even eliminate the most egregious forms of anti-black cultures of violence. The problem is one of power, the power to ignore, the power to assault and kill with impunity, and with it the power to frame centuries-long Negrophobic violence as due to a lack of fresh ideas. So I want to ask some questions that come off a little contrarian, but we're trying to really get at the assumptions that people carry. So if the system is broken, then what exactly would have broke it? Like, answer that how you feel.
Yeah. So if the system is broken at all, if this system is broken, the fracture lines of its breaking is the revolutionary work of colonized and enslaved people. That's what broke it. It's not broken in the liberal terms as if it's not working well enough, and because it was really a good system and it's just something that went wrong. But the breaking of this system, the breaking of the colony, is the fracture lines, because the colony still exists. The fracture lines that exist is directly a result of anti-colonialist work. Black enslaved people's work, indigenous people's work. That's what created the fracture lines and the weak spots of the colony. That's why it's not entirely a totalitarian perfection of anti-black racial violence, because it's been pushed back in a number of significant ways. So that is broken. The liberal broken is one that assumes that the system, colony, the slave master's invention, the slave master's country, that this thing that they have invented is a good thing. It's just continuously lost its way, and that can be seen by the mountains of corpses that are strewn along its path. That is evidence that this beautiful slave master's institution has gone off the rails. This is illogical. This is irrational. The mere fact that the slave master was in charge and had the possibility to invent systems shows that humanity was broken. The fact that slave masters are continuously praised today and have things that have not been erased out of history, whether they are presidents or founding fathers or just regular Joes on the street, the fact that their memory is still spoken is the fact that humanity has been destroyed. The possibility of goodness has been destroyed. So their world, in which the inverse bizarro world that we're living in, where the slave masters are creating a country, and that country is supposed to be seen as the epitome of good, that has just been somehow in error when it is causing bloodshed of the dispossessed. That is in itself is the breaking of a normal good consciousness. Their evil being presented as good, their way of life, their mode and institutions presenting as good, that is what we have been breaking century upon century. And that break is through slave revolts, through enslaved people's revolts, through anti-colonial revolts, indigenous revolts. That break, that ability to continuously apologize for and clean up a slave master's institution, are stopping that, are breaking it, are saying that this thing is impossible to continue, like it cannot continue. That is where their work has been broken.
It kind of plays into the myth of like the American dream, right? Where they view America as this amazing land where anything can happen as long as you just try hard. It kind of just plays into that almost.
Yeah, but worse, I think that America has no right to dream. And it's not just that the American dream is flawed, it's that this idea that this colonial, first of all, America is a dream, and it's the dream of the slave master. So the slave master's dream is America. It's not that America then you can have a dream in America. That's just the levels of ridiculousness that we got caught up in. But the dream of the slave master is to create a colony that is one of anti-Black and anti-Indigenous violence and privileges white men and white people. That is this is what we're living in. This is their dream. And so it is that dream that must be dissolved into nothingness. Not even that America can dream. It's the dream that is America that needs to be dissolved into nothing. The dream that is the colony, the dream that is Rhodesia, that dream to actually have your Rhodesia or the white highlands of Kenya. Those dreams have been dissolved. And so all other dreams that are its kin must be sent on their way as well.
Right, because even when you say the American dream, there's still an assumption that, you know, it's a failed promise, which that's how people tend to frame that. And that still comes off, like we'll get to the word reform. That still comes off even under the idea that it's broken. Like it's a failed promise. It's something you can't live up to. But like you're saying, even the premise of you being able to live a dream in America is a myth in of itself. Like just the whole concept that we steal everything and then you can have a dream, you know, under that. Like it's just, you know, like it's counterintuitive.
That dream that is America is a suffocating, dominating dream that is at this moment suffocating better, more broad, more justifiable dreams. That dream is an actual act of suffocation of other possible dreams. This dream has displaced any worthwhile dream that could have existed. There's no such thing as a slave master and his dreams that should be celebrated. I don't care what he dreamed.
Right. It
doesn't matter what, even if he dreamed something good, he was a slave master. So forget what he dreamed.
Right.
But he didn't. He dreamed colonialism. So this is why it takes going back further and further and further to the actual point of colonialism to see that everything that they've created needs to be thrown out, not just be inside of their world and then try to correct for its excesses.
And speaking of that, I think you should add Dream to the list. But
I agree.
But two, when people say, and we kind of dealt with this in the intro, but when people say, you know, because you're hearing it more often now, where people will say the system isn't broken; it was built this way. And we were talking before on air as well. Like and I've even said this to Ryan, I'm skeptical of that because the type of people I'm seeing saying it, kind of what you just said earlier, still kind of talking about being within this thing, even though they're acknowledging that it wasn't built properly. You know, so I'm just curious, how would you respond to this kind of new, this new framing of it, even in that sense? Like they'll actually acknowledge your point. Even people who are reformists will say, well, you're right. It was built on slavery and colonialism and all of these things. So we got to build a new system or a better system. Like how do you you see any negotiating with that?
Well, no. The problem is they're encroaching on radicals' territory, which is what they've always done. They've had their nonsense words and nonsense ideas, and then they saw that radicals were always closer to the truth, so they kept on going closer and closer and taking and repurposing our things for them. So fundamentally, yes, the system was always built like this. It's literally what I just said. But what they mean is that there is a resolution that is possible, which is reforming that system. You're saying, yes, the system was built this way, but it doesn't mean that, okay, so obviously the system is built this way. Well, is it like a train? So throw the train away. No, it's that, okay, the system is built this way. So let's rearrange the train a little bit better. Or let's build something better, acknowledging our past. They've deliberately taken the critique away from us and put it to that same project, which is the reproduction and extension of colonialism. They are always interested in the reproduction and extension of white supremacist colonialism. And so when we say white supremacist colonialism is a problem, being interested in that reproduction, they will say, yes, white supremacist colonialism is a problem. So let us continue white supremacist colonialism, acknowledging that, and then make it
right. Right. Yeah. That's a perfect way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what you're seeing now. Like we will acknowledge it in rhetorically, and we'll just keep it going. But like
Yeah.
logically speaking, if it's a train, like you to your point, even if it was a train and the train is built bad, then the train is it's a wrap. Like that's you don't deal with that train anymore. Maybe you literally take parts from it to build something else, but you don't, and that's it maybe, or you just go get new parts. What you don't do is try to rebuild the train because the train is fucked up. Like it's a wrap. There's nothing you can do with the train. It's be one thing if we say the train has bad brakes,
or even a better example, like a faulty building, right? Or just completely.
You demolish it.
Corners, you cut the corners and building it. You use cheap materials, and then obviously later on you pay for that. You're not gonna try and reform the building. You got to just tear the thing down and
you
just try
literally demolish it. You blow it up. I mean, it happens all the time. You don't, you don't try to recuperate the building. Now you can refurbish things that have some value to them, but I think it's fair to say this isn't one of those things. So,
and the problem also comes in thinking that America was built on something, because it creates this idea that there is some essence, and then there is a building on top of it. But that's not the case. That the building and the America is the exact same process. That there is no like safe space of an essence that is good, and it's built on the back of all these atrocities, but America still exists. No, America is the bloodshed that happens all across this territory, this land. It is the fetters and the throwing people off of boats and the reservation systems. It isn't built on America isn't built on these things. America is the expression of white supremacy, not adding on to it or something else other than it. It is the expression. It is coterminous with the actual bloodshed. It is coterminous with the actual violence, because there is no reservation system without this land being reformed and made into an apartheid state. There is nothing like that. You don't have an America somewhere out. If that's the myth of ideology and of patriotism, then there's some ideal America floating somewhere in the sky. But America, as it's materially felt, is actually somebody being lynched and somebody being thrown into the ocean. That's what America is. Because without that America, the end of America, the end of Canada, the end of Australia, the end of all these settler colonial states is the end of that power forced on the earth that has made these conditions of our lynchings likely.
No, I think that's good. So you're saying, just to make sure I understand it right, and I think that's a good way of saying, and I've thought about this a little before, like, there is no abstract America. There is only the things that actually have happened or are still happening. There is no separation of like this ideal that can be built on top of atrocities. Like there is only the atrocities. They are baked into the whole thing. There is no separation of that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you wouldn't say the Klan is built on lynching. You would say the Klan itself, its entire reason to be, is anti-Black atrocity. And this is the same thing with America. America is not like it's not like there was this good thing that existed called America, and then it got ruined by being built on a number of bad things. No, the first moment of colonialism was violent and was atrocity. It is expressed in atrocity. That was the first thing. There wasn't any time outside of that. But it's useful to be able to make sure to separate the violence of the Klan from the Klan if you want to save the Klan. If you want to say the Klan is better, if you want to maintain the Klan as a justifiable and legitimate institution, then of course you separate those two things. Because then you could say, isn't it a shame what the Klan is doing? Let's make a better Klan tomorrow.
Right. So
when the Klan is imperfect or it's tragic.
So even I think what you're getting at, I think is the point. Even the term "build" still obscures how it really functions. Yeah.
I think, and this is one of the reasons why I thought the dictionary is important, is that the cliche is the repository of ideological violence in say almost all political cliches. I mean, probably general cliches in general, but political cliches almost always respond to the status quo. It always naturalizes the status quo. So whenever people say anything like this country is built on something, well, most likely something is happening in order to sustain the logic or rationale of the state. The cliches are never absolutely divisible from state power.
Right.
And to your point, Black, when you say it's baked into the system, I mean, all this is the recipe, right, of the state.
Yeah.
Once you bake something, you can't separate the ingredients. It's already there.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's no. Once you've actually mixed it together, it's just pie. You know what I'm saying? It's just or whatever. It's just the cake. It's not like, oh, this is the, the salt, or this is the sugar. No, you just taste it as a whole thing, and that's just what it is.
There's no cake outside of the flour and the sugar.
Right, and that,
right.
Yeah. That's a. I think that's actually a really brilliant point, because you get to see how things really materially are actually happening, and we're not. Mm-hmm. You don't separate stuff. Like, it's very good dialectical way of thinking about it. All right, that's just one term. All right, so Ryan, you can do the next one.
All right.
Begin to.
One of the more diabolical terms, Begin to promises a solution of anti-Black violence and new approaches and ideas previously unthought, as if lynchings and beatings occur because no one came up with a plan on how to not place a rope around a neck, or how to not find Black skin thrillingly breakable. And the question is, what or why can't we begin to, and what would we be beginning?
Yeah. So if you've been around a number of activist circles, a number of Black political circles, you will very often hear this phrase, something along this phrase, that we need to start this, or we need to begin this, or we need to do something to radically change things. And I think it is based on the idea that there is a sense of time, or a sense of time that is always starting at ground zero. It's always starting at the stopwatch started, and then we start again, and we start again. And what that does is that always moves. First of all, it erases all of the history of struggle and everything that has happened before. It also erases the present work that is being done at any moment. But it also one plays to the narcissism of the speaker, or of the group of the speaker, and the idea that we are somehow in the position that we are because we have not been genius enough, or haven't found the actual secret ingredient to be able to change things fundamentally. No, it is not a mystery. It is not some type of myth. It's not like if we adjust this one, or kind of play around with the codes enough, that we'll come together and find the actual solution. No, they have power, and they have chosen not to change from the original anti-Black traditions that they've always held. They've chosen. They could have gone another way. They could have gone a number of different ways. They've chosen to do this, and they still have the power to do this. That's the problem. It's not because we haven't invented a way to be able to, maybe if we teach our kids Swahili, then maybe fundamentally that will be the key to kind of liberate us. No, it's because the same people doing the same things still have power to do the same thing. And nothing will change until these people go away. And this has been a long struggle. There's no begin to. This has been a 400-year struggle. And the liberation will require no longer seeking this new special mixed code, but recognizing that this is the problem and going against this problem, as is always the case all over the colonial world.
Yeah, that one, I don't know if you met it in this way, but because I was thinking about or you said, I think you kind of said in activist spaces, you'll hear that even among people who claim to be fighting against it. We need to begin to do this, or even when they talk about the country that they call the country needs to come together, and we need to begin to see each other as humans, or we need to begin to, understand, or we need to begin to hold the police accountable, or what, and it's kind of, it's ahistorical for one, because again, it assumes nothing ever happened. I remember one time I was in a room with that's when I was in college, and I was just like, we ain't the first people to sit in a room and try to figure this shit out. Like, we're not the first people. So when we say stuff like we begin to, it's almost as if history started with your attempt to deal with the problem, you know. Like, but prior to that, you know, we were just kind of here, right? Like, it doesn't give credit to all the different resistance and all the different struggles that preceded you as well. Like, that's why when people say begin to, I don't even know what they really mean. Like, begin to do what, you know?
Right.
And
That's a good
Fanon
point.
speaks about this precisely. He says that the native, faced with the absolute destruction of the colonial power, the absolute power of the colonial power, what the native will often do is rely on superstition, on the demon or the beast or the witches in the mountain, because those things are entirely too strong, even stronger than the colonists. And they are in a much harder position to be able to get out of the control of the witches and the superstition. And so they start launching their attacks against these things. Like, how are we going to get out of our curse? How are we going to get out of our problem? Because it's easier to do that, because it's a way of avoiding the actual clear difficulty of the colonial situation, that the European sector has their foot on the necks of the native quarter. That's just the situation. And it's better to believe in witches, better to believe in a hard situation that we can't really figure out, better to believe in any type of superstition, however you want to call it, in order so we don't deal with this fundamental and clear problem that the European sector has its foot on the native sector. Believe in witches, believe in, we have to begin to start getting ourselves out of this difficult problem that no one else has ever tried to attempt to figure out before. And this is the way to do it. Believe that. Believe it's a tremendous and difficult problem that needs all forms of genius to be able to deal with. Because in doing that, you don't have to deal with the state on your block at this moment.
Yeah, it reminds me of I don't know if you're familiar with Amiri Baraka had a poem called Dope. There's a constant, he's playing like this dope fiend, but this dope fiend's walking around, he's like, it must be the devil. He's like, everything must be the devil. He's like, it must be the devil.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, must be the devil. It ain't capitalism, it ain't capitalism, it ain't capitalism. No, it ain't that. Jimmy Carter wouldn't lie. Life's unfair, but it ain't capitalism, must be the devil. Oh, wow, it ain't the police. Jimmy Carter wouldn't lie. You know Rosalind wouldn't, or Lillian. His drunken racist brother ain't no reflection on Jimmy. Must be the devil, got him, I tell you. The devil killed Malcolm and Dr. King, too. Even killed both Kennedys and Pablo Neruda. Overthrew Allende's government, killed Lumumba, and is negotiating with Stephen Fetchit, sleeping, eating Birmingham over there in Salisbury, going under the name of Ian Smith. Must be the devil.
Oh, I think he was like, I'm trying to remember. I have this poem memorized, but it's hard to remember certain lines. But like,
Sir, put your money in the plate. Don't be late. Don't have to wait. You're going to be in heaven after you die. You're going to get all you need once you're gone. Yes, sir. I heard it on the Jeffersons. I heard it on the rookies. I swallowed it whole on Roots. Wasn't it nice? Wasn't it nice? Slavery was so cool, and all you had to do was wear derbies and vests and train chickens and buy your way free if you had a mind to. Must be the devil. It wasn't the white folks, them lazy niggas chained themselves and threw their own black asses in the bottom of the boat.
You know, like, everything is like, and he's playing on that cliche, like, blame it on the devil, blame it on this spooky force, versus just dealing directly with, you know, with really what's going on. So yeah, like,
you're right. Yeah. And when you mystify it, it's kind of like, it makes it easier for you to cop out, like you said. It's like, oh, it's not the system, it's not the state, it's the devil.
Yeah.
Monsters.
Yeah, because it's hard. It's hard. We're in a bad position where the colonists anywhere is always in a bad position because they have everything. They have the entire state. They have white supremacist society, especially inside of colonial societies. They have white supremacist society. They have all of it. And we are in the same position that we've been in for a very long time. And so that is a hard thing to deal with. So instead of dealing with it, we start pretending that there is something outside of this immediate relationship that we can get out of. That the key lies outside, because it's better to believe it's somewhere over there that we haven't figured out yet, that it is obvious and we just can't seem to get out of it. But remember, our begin-tos are not the same as their begin-tos. When they're saying we need to begin to listening to like Black people, and we need to begin to hearing to all these things, that has nothing to do with anything. That is just it's almost as if they know that they're lying while they're saying it, because if they are beginning to hear Black people and beginning to have conversation, they must necessarily realize that if Black people have ever said anything ever for the last 400 years, and they would have mentioned something along these lines. So your beginning to is directly a confession of your deliberate suffocating of the voices of the people who have been saying things for 400 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to sit around this long and be like, we need to begin to listen. I mean, like you said, there's nothing to even take seriously. You know, so, like
throw that out.
I mean, but it's in a way, it kind of like both of the begin tos kind of mirror each other, because in a way, the very idea of them doing that is no different than the devil or the boogeyman or the mystical force. It's just as unrealistic, honestly, as the witch or the the Bigfoot in the mountains. It's just as unrealistic that they're gonna come around to it and see that this is this is a problem, or this is like that's just as much of a myth or a mystical idea as anything else. Like, so in a way, they really do mirror each other, because it's like they're not coming around. Like that's not. If that was the case, we wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
And in order to save our precious relationships with that we've built with that site, we will have to believe in those myths that, oh yes, maybe they just didn't understand, maybe they're ignorant, maybe they're this. But really, when you think about it, it's not a really hard thing to figure out. It's not really hard to see, hey, there seems to be a pattern of violence in history against a certain group of people, a certain type of oppression. That's not mysterious. There are much more mysterious things in the world, which they seem to have been figuring out on a regular basis. Cracking codes of DNA and figuring out things. The fact of Black history is not actually as mysterious as it is. So that whole idea is ridiculous. What we should be doing is just be like, okay, well, obviously, if you're saying that you're ignorant about this, you're just lying. You're just lying, and let's move on. Let's not talk about it, because what ends up happening is they say you're ignorant. Oh, here's some books. Now you learn. No, they've had the books. They wrote the books. They're publishing the books. They know all of it. It's easier to believe that they're ignorant than to believe that they're deliberate.
Yeah, because my thing is, like, even the people, even if you don't as an individual, even if you don't quote unquote know, I mean, it assumes that even if you gave someone the knowledge, that's gonna change their position. Because I've always said, especially with the new surge of anti-racism and talks about privilege and white privilege, I was like, y'all, honestly, we're just giving them more information to do what they already do. Like we're just helping manage like now they have the lingo. It's easier to manage the resistance because now you have the lingo. And now you're even clearer on the position that you do hold. So if we're going to use the term privilege, now it's like, oh, I have all these things. Now you have even more of a reason to not let it go, not to give it away. Like it's wild to me to believe that you can reveal to someone that they have privilege. Like you tell me, yo, you got all this power, bro, and you need to give it away. Like, who does that? You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? Point. So even if that was a thing, I'm just like that. You think by telling somebody like that maybe like halfway ignorant about the money they have, you actually have $1 million. You thought you only had 200,000. You need to share your $1 million. Like who does? You know what I'm saying? It doesn't. That's like nobody does that. So, but we really walk around here and think like, man, if you could get them to acknowledge their privilege and all the money that's in their bank account, then they're gonna give it away. Like who? Like that's not. That's backwards.
I've never actually seen a case where a racist was presented with facts and then changed their mind. Facts that they didn't know. I've never seen a case. And if there was such a case, it definitely does not happen at anywhere close to the scale that it needs to happen for there to be anything significant to happen. I've never seen one case. But if it happened 20,000 times, it's nowhere close to what is necessary to kind of make fixing ignorance some type of useful solution to anything. It's just a necessary myth.
If you told 100 people they had $1 million in the bank that they didn't know they had, maybe, and 5 of those people decided to share their money, you're still in a bad spot. If you're the people who don't have any money. Right. And that's basically what we're looking at. Maybe 5 of those people are like, damn, you're right, I got too much money. Here's $10. You know, but it's like,
yeah. I mean, and even the solutions that we come up with are worse because they're, to your point about telling people to check their privilege. I mean, you're gonna do nothing for us by checking your races on at Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? You're doing nothing, absolutely nothing.
That's
there's somebody around there patting them on the back for it. Saying, "Good job."
Yeah, that's them giving you the $10 out of the $1 million bank account. That's
exactly.
You know, like that's what that is. And then most of them won't even do that. But I'm saying like maybe one of those
$10.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't do anything. You can't do anything with it.
No, there's nothing. There's nowhere that money literally goes right back to them because where else you gonna spend it, right? So I'm saying, but even if there's 3 people who give away all their money, like that really do find some road to redemption, Damascus, whatever. That's out of 100 people, those 3 people that gave away their $1 million, 100 people, $1 million. What is that, Ryan? $100 million? Yeah. So it's like. So it's like $97 million is still not yours out of $100 million. So it's just like, I'm just saying like that's not a perfect analogy, but I'm just saying that's how wild it is to me when we think that by telling somebody that they have power, they're gonna give it away. Like that doesn't, it doesn't jive at all. Like,
and it's remarkably useful if you are that billionaire who wants to maintain their wealth and hoard their power. To be able to continuously say that every year when I give you $100 that you can't do anything with, slowly we're progressing into something better, and eventually we'll get there. Yes, that's less than paying taxes. That's less than paying charity. I mean, even the charity is an invention of bourgeoisie, whatever. But just tell them, okay, $100, and then you're going to get better someday somehow. Well, that is perfect. You don't even need police then. You start letting people waiting every year for their $100 while you accumulate millions. Now, the other thing is that the ignorance of Black life is no excuse. The ignorance of Black life is no excuse. It doesn't matter if they know or they don't know. Like, this is why I think we need to be a little bit more mean, a little bit, take things a little further. It doesn't matter at all if they are ignorant of this. Who cares? How many things that we're ignorant for and we have to pay the price for? We can get arrested for not knowing that we can't be at this place after dark at a certain time. Or worse, and we suffer and there's no funerals, nobody patting on his back saying, oh, they didn't know and all that. That was it. That story is ended. So the ignorance that they didn't know what was happening, this whole idea of our purpose in educating them is ridiculous. If there are whole bunches of innocent people who are ignorant of the fact of our life, then that is a problem of colonialism. That is an unfortunate casualty of colonialism, that so many people have been trained into the ignorance so that they did not see what's coming. If they are ignorant of Black life, that is their business, and it's not our business. And we have no reason. This is not even part of the conversation for us to be able to start letting them know. If they are smart, it is important for them to educate themselves as much as they can as possible, because there's not going to be a whole bunch of people waiting in the time of the revolution or the time where we actually get free to be able to like, you get a pass because you didn't know that stomping on Black people's necks for 400 years was a problem. No, they are ignorant. Fine, that's just what we're working with.
Yeah, there's still a sense to want to redeem that, and I think all of this kind of speaks to that false sense of redemption. That just doesn't really hold up. Because you're right. Like, I mean, it's almost like we're on their time when you operate.
Yeah.
Like we're not on our time. We're on your time because you didn't know. And then the thing becomes about just that. Like, we just need to tell them, and that becomes the project.
Yeah.
And we and that's where we're at a lot now, where it's like that project, like we already talked about, actually in many ways reifies what's already happening. It's not, you're not dispossessing them of anything. We just need to educate them. Like, it's just not it.
If there are tragedies, then it is the tragedy of those otherwise good-hearted, goodwill people that just didn't get to know on time. That they would have been on our side, that they would have been okay, they would have been good people. If there are tragedies at all, it's that. It is not our being killed. It is not a lynching is a tragedy. It's not a person being shot on the side of the road that's a tragedy. No, that is part of the long Holocaust that continues. It's not something to be able to say, oh, wow, it's a sad thing. No, if there is sad at all, and I'm not even sure that it's sad, but if there is any type of sadness at all, it is those people who would otherwise have been good people that didn't get, because of the same restrictions in thought that colonialism imposes on people, didn't get the ability to be able to find out what is truth and what is good. Those good people, that is the tragedy, not our being filleted on the colonial court steps. No, none of that.
Next is, and this is one that a lot of people have heard in various different ways, so most people will probably be familiar with this, but I'm really interested in your take on this because this term gets used back and forth in so many different ways. But both sides, a lot of people have heard both sides. You say both sides announces collusion with power and erases its victim's record. It plans to distort representations of scale. It intends injustice. It uses the fallacy of false equivalency. That's an important part. It uses the fallacy of false equivalency to present a historical record of oppression as a battle between equally guilty, irrational, and uncompromising children. So again, these are all contrarian questions. So like, what are the sides people are speaking of? And are there equal sides in a state? Like, you can answer the first question. Then secondly, are there even so-called equal sides in the state, as in the state?
Yeah, well, so let's go with the second question. The equality or equal weightedness is a very rare thing to happen in nature in general. Like, it's very rare that certain things are actually equal. That a squirrel is weighs the same as another squirrel. Like, that's very rare. Much more rare in states and societies, that there is one group that is of equal power and equal strength or equal guilt as another group. Those things are almost automatically nonsensical to think about an equality of peoples or anything like that. Definitely not equality of the law. It's just the moment that the equality of the law happens, that means ideology has won, because somewhere racism has been operating and has just been dismissed. So whenever people are talking about both sides, okay, one side's here and one side over there, they are using this term of equality or equal weightedness, that there are just two groups that are just like two equally weighted problems or social problems. And there is a way to be able to kind of meet in the middle. But no, it is always a lopsided scale, and it's always incredibly lopsided. That's the nature of colonialism. That's the nature of, even in a democratic society, it would be lopsided. So it always employs the idea of it always employs this fiction of equality meant to mask the injustice and the non-equal weight of both sides. Who are the sides? Well, very often when they're talking about who the sides are, they're talking about conservatives and police on one side, and Black people being attacked on another side. And these are like the two equal sides, which can't possibly be the case for a reason I just highlighted. But this side of the continuing the tradition of slavery, the side of continuing the tradition of indigenous genocide, this post-European Holocaust, still talking about white supremacy and white hierarchies thing. That side is quite a big thing to just call it a side, because it has had a significant role in the extermination of people all over the world. And to consider the people who are their targets of extermination, the people who are their targets of repression and destruction, to be on the equal side is in itself presenting the beating of someone, the victim of someone, with the beater itself, the abuser itself. It advances, or it presents that the victim with more power in order to at the end of the conversation, to take away any type of questions of objectivity or justice, etc. You build up the victim in order to say that, yes, you were beaten, yes, you were hurt, yes, you continuously destroyed for so many centuries, whatever, but let's have an equal term. No, any equality that is made is a equality that is the result of a revolutionary struggle. It's not the equality of the slave and the slave master. By definition, they're not equal. And so to present them as equal is to be able to kind of obfuscate the relationship between master and slave.
Yeah, it seems like there's no like sides in and of itself doesn't even seem to define what you're describing. You know what I mean? Like, what is the side of, like you said, a slave and a slave master? Like, what's the side? What side? Like, side implies kind of a neutral ground,
Right.
and then we both show up on the neutral ground on our separate sides, and then we battle it out. That's not what's happening. So what side? You know, like the word side in and of itself tends to just like completely water down or just dilute what's even occurring. Like I don't see a side in that. A side, like I said, is if such a thing can happen. It doesn't mean everything is equal, but we're playing sports. We show up. Maybe you have better players or whatever, but we show up, same rules, same officials, nothing's fixed, and we play.
Exactly.
You know, that's sides. Maybe you beat us, whatever. You know, but if we show up and you know, one team has guns, and the other team has nothing. Yeah. So it's like one team has got like, you know, like one team is fully able-bodied, the other team has completely been disabled by the team who's able-bodied. Like there's no sides in that, you know, like that doesn't. I'm saying, so just the whole concept of sides. When people say both sides, even if you say, well, both sides or one side has more power, there's no side when the power differentiation is that like broad or that wide. Like, you know, there's no side to that.
And the side they're talking about is a side that has already announced, already by their living, has shown their dedication to playing unfairly, being unjust, and to the violent destruction of the other team through death. While the other team might be playing basketball, this team is playing death. They're trying to kill and exterminate. Not only that, but they continue to hold the symbols of that Nazism and that destruction to this day. So it's not as if, they in the past were exterminating people, but now it was a hefty past and it was a problematic past that they're trying. No, the conservative settler side in America continues to speak in the terms of destruction and violent repression, still speaking in apartheid. So it is not so much that there are two teams. It is that there is one group of people that is stepping on the flora and fauna, stepping on the grass, and that is the field that they've set up.
Yeah.
Right. They control the field. They control everything. The stands, the fans, and even when you
the
said
refs,
the refs, everything is rigged. And even, you know, when you said this language gets regurgitated, one thing that sticks out in my mind when people were protesting in Ferguson, and then I remember Obama coming on and saying, "I don't want to tip the scale either way." Again, that same language, like saying, like, again, the false equivalency, like they're both equal. Like, I don't want to tip the scale, but
the scale is tipped, bro.
it's already been tipped.
Yeah.
There might not even be any scale.
Yeah. And as now Obama, you can continuously pretend that you are somewhere in the middle between two things, even though you are the director of the institutions of anti-Black violence. You're somehow not the director. You're kind of just like in the middle, like, oops, I don't know what's going on, type of thing. So that's ridiculous. But if people believe it, they actually believe that, okay, yeah, you know, he's playing, maybe you can bring, like this whole idea, there's another term, bring the country together. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? That makes not even on the first level does that make any sense. But Obama is like, okay, let's bring the country. What? That means nothing. But what it's useful to do, first of all, it's depending on the idea of the country. And it creates a world where the people who are churned out by this abattoir are supposed to somehow be cool with the butcher. This is not but it's still presented as this is going to be the case. This is what we're going to be trying to do. We're going to bring the country together. You distort the reality to the point where nonsense actually is dominant, and any form of just general cursory look at the situation becomes radical.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, have you noticed when? Because again, both sides get used a lot. I mean, there's even a whole. They blame this the state or the U.S. blames this on the Russians, so they call it both sidism. That's the thing that we really saw rise with the kind of Red Scare stuff that they did under Trump. So if I come to you and I say, black people, like I was even you said you actually note this in your piece. I think it's in this part with Giuliani. So Giuliani's like, black people, y'all say Black Lives Matter, but y'all keep killing yourselves. And then you respond with anything. You say, well, what about racism, or what about the state? And they're like, they're playing, you're playing both sides. Or that's the other thing is what aboutism, right? So you're playing both sides, like it's both sides. Like you're making it about, like what aboutism? Like, why like you're trying to direct it away from the fact, like you don't want to take responsibility for the fact that you people keep killing each other, like, so you want to make it about both sides. Like, how do you kind of respond to that kind of, fallacy?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I will say, and this is a very unpopular opinion, and I admit it, but I don't think there should be any conversations with them at all. Because at the moment that you entertain the possibility of a conversation with them, you sacrifice so much. You sacrifice your time, your intellectual resources, and you sacrifice the ability to be able to see that this side is a rival to you, is an antagonist to you. Because you start having faith that the reason that you're in this situation is because that other side, again, has been ignorant or has not had a time to be able to sit down and chat with you a lot or talk to you. So you end up talking to Giuliani, and then you're fighting them on their terms and all that, as if Giuliani will, once being presented with the most beautified prose, have his heart change and become, okay, you know what, this makes absolute sense now, and I'm actually going to be walking in the front lines and trying to overthrow all racist oppression. That is not going to happen. But this could be the only reason that you actually sat down with him. Because if it's not, if that can't be the case, then why are you speaking to him? What is the point of speaking to him? Because the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to lure you into a nonsensical conversation at best, and worse, making you have faith in the same people that have their foot on you.
No, I think that hits, because I think I know you didn't put whataboutism, but whataboutism and both sides kind of are like cousins, because it's always, well, those people over there, and people will say that by you bringing up the retort that you're somehow engaging in this kind of like evasive answering. But like, to your point, like what are we even talking about? Like so it's like, why are we talking? Because people who do that, that kind of I know you are, but what am I? Basically, kind of like a child's play type of thing. Like they're not really interested. And I do think, when we think about, especially on social media, that kind of discourse, I don't think it's helped us overall. It goes back to what we were saying, like maybe 3 people out of 100 are like, man, this sucks. But the 97 people are still, they're not only just as bad, but they've now gotten worse. They've doubled down and tripled down. Because you try to confront them on stuff that they were never going to be moved on. So it's like, we'll quote tweet somebody, and I don't want to get too much into, social media discourse, but I'm saying that is something I've noticed is a way to channel energy away, is arguing with the people online as a form of somehow moving the needle,
Yeah. Because I can argue with my people all day because I actually believe in them. I actually have faith in them. I actually believe that they have been subjected to ideology just like I have been subjected to ideology. And so with that conversation, some things can improve, because it's not that we're against the freedom. We're actually just affected by ideology in a number of different ways. And this is why conversation is useful. But conversation with people who we know have as their stated purpose our continued oppression can't be as fruitful. It just can't. There's no way of thinking of that as fruitful. The other thing is, conversation. If it does educate, well, fine, it might educate, right? The other side, whatever, it might educate. But also our freedom, the moments of our liberation, also are educative tools. We don't have to only teach people about why it's necessary for our freedom by telling them. Our struggles and our victories on this battlefield itself will let them know something. We'll teach them something. Our ability to be able to get out of that slavery and burn the plantation down might give them a much more of a lesson about Black freedom than us telling, "Hey, master, you gotta stop beating me. It's not acceptable." No, they're seeing their livestock burn. They're seeing their world being torn off from the sky. That is also a textbook, and we should not ban that one.
Yeah, that's real. So we got go ahead,
Change.
Ryan. Yeah.
With change, imprecision is the point. Similar to advertisers, now with more, it is deliberately ambiguous, using the power of suggestion to manipulate its audience. The demand for unspecified change will always be preferred by those who will like to dress up as activists or caring people, but bristle at the demand to defund the police by an initial specified amount. How does change obscure violence?
So you see the corpses piled up around you, you see the oppression continue, and then you say, "We want change." But that change, just by its being ambiguous, allows for the possibility of nothing. It allows for the possibility of nothing to be the solution. Because people saying, "I want change," or that we need to do better. Anything could be considered better. Anything could be considered change. And all it is another way of saying, "Hey, I see that this is a problem," and then moving on with your day. There is nothing in the demand for this empty change or the demand for this "we need to do better" that means nothing, that means anything. And so what is much more dangerous, what is much more the people who are change peddlers want to avoid, is the precision or the direct demand for certain things to be done. I want this thing to go away. I want this actual patriotic system, this patriotic ideology to remove itself. I want this police precinct to no longer have any power over me. That is specific. But if you say, "I want change about the police department," the police department can exist tomorrow and nothing is going to affect your coffee one way or another. So in order to be able to both present yourself as for the cause, for what is the objective reality of violent discrimination in the form of bodies across on the street, in order to say that, hey, the weight of that, of the power of that image is so important, I still want to maintain the system that created it. But I want to say that this is a problem. You say change, you say we got to do better, because then you've announced that you've seen it, and then you maintain the system as it is. Well, this becomes change, asking for an empty change and asking for an empty "let's do better," or whatever other form that is as ambiguous, is useful to maintaining the colonial system as it is.
Yeah, I think it speaks to like what we were talking about acknowledging earlier, right? So, but I think you said you'll say like yeah, we acknowledge that, you know, this is a white supremacist system, and then the white supremacist system just continues by saying it, but you told us it was, so it's supposed to signify something, right? So it's like so change is even more obscure because you don't, at least in that case they acknowledge the name of something, right? but change is literally just whatever you want to fill it in as. It's like, okay, we need to, you know, like, despite there being a real specific way, not just specific because we asked for it, because this will actually deal with the problem. Like, we want this to, whatever the thing is, this will actually alleviate the problem. I'm poor, give me money. Like, very simple. And we're like, you know, we need to change poverty in America, you know, like it's, versus just like just give me money, right? Or, you know, or just alleviate the things that makes us broke, whatever, you know. No, we need to change poverty, you know, and politicians are very big on this. I mean, we're talking about Obama. He literally ran on this. Yeah, Obama ran on this phrase.
It's like glittery
change
generality.
Perfect.
It can be
Yeah.
anything. And it's in your article. I mean, it's not written here on the document, but on the article, you said change is constant. It happens all the time. So change can be anything, you know.
Yeah.
And you can just people can fill in the blanks with whatever they want,
Yeah.
however they want to interpret that change, whatever
Yeah.
that may be.
Yeah. Change is absolutely always, just like our retraining of police officers is always happening. Adjustment of police policy is always happening. These things are always happening. So it is a way to be able to speak about nothing but appear that you're speaking about something, which is extremely important if your interest is to maintaining colonialist or white supremacist violence. Say you want something to change while maintaining it with a sleight of hand by keeping it as it is. So these ideas are useful in spinning the reproduction of violence as something that is fundamentally other than that. So you're saying, hey, I want something to be different. I want something to be new. I want something to begin to be something. And you're not being precise. Why? And this is the question. Why opt to say I want change? Why opt to say I want better instead of saying something precise? Why would the speaker say that they want change rather than something else? What is the difference? Obviously, the difference is that whatever is precisely demanded for, whatever is precisely targeted, is now no longer on the table, and we can exist in this abstract universe. Change in itself might actually just be a modern phenomenon. It's something that is new to like the 1950s and on, because it is hard for me to imagine people speaking about we want change on the plantation and on rice fields, etc. It's very hard for me to see that as happening. What I can imagine is they taking a bolt out of the fence and letting the horses go, so that the master loses their property, salting the earth or destroying the crops in the dark. I can see these things. I can see removing some of the tools so that of their instruments of violence, their torture chamber stuff. I can see that. I don't see we want change, because very often the people who are under the thumb of oppression know exactly what part of this oppression they don't like and what they would like to get rid of. And it's very strange for them to be able to speak on those specific things, and to not speak on those specific things and actually be vague on it. When they're vague because of the police, not as a way of resisting the police.
Yeah. This is the one I forgot and I was thinking of that I think goes well with change. I'm actually glad I'm remembering it now, as opposed to before we went over this term. But I hear this from people that I completely disagree with, but might be black. And then I also hear this from the state. Will say we're all going in the same direction. Have you ever heard that one? But
no.
Okay, so I'll explain. They'll say, let's say I'm a socialist and you're a capitalist, but despite the fact that these ideas don't work together at all, we're all going in the same direction, Yannick. We all want black liberation. We're all going in the same direction. But if black liberation is, and I'm using this just simply, is if it's black capitalism, and then your black liberation is socialism or something even beyond that or whatever, but it's clearly something where the people share the wealth, whatever. Those don't coincide. Those are actually opposing forces. But people will say we're going in the same direction. Or some folks who vote they were very much like into the Democratic Party, and let's say you're not into that, and they'll say, we just got different ways of getting there. And I was having this, I wasn't really a debate, it was just a discussion with the elder who was like, we have different ways. I'm like, no, sometimes people are literally going north and I'm going south, right? Like, we're not going in the same direction just because we're talking about black people or whatever. And then even sometimes the oppressor will say the same things, like, we just have different ways. You'll hear even like Democrats and Republicans say the similar, like we all want best for this country, but we're all going in the same direction. We all want America to succeed, but we just have different ways of getting there. You'll hear people in the primaries when they're running within their party say that even more often. We have different ways of getting there, but ideas have real material consequences and they don't just exist in the abstract. So certain things don't go together. So I'm just curious of how you would kind of respond to that kind of framing, because I think it's not synonymous, but it has a similar ring to change because it obscures this some direction we're just all going in. This kind of metaphysical Black liberation or freedom or whatever, but it's not really a clear sense of what we're doing or how we're getting there or anything. Not precise.
I mean, like, so the first things that came to my mind when you were explaining what this meant was one, marriage, which means I'm definitely not going to where you're going, because I'm going outside of the plantation. You're running inside of the house and making it better. We're not going to the same direction whatsoever. And they're not the same freedoms. You going to be a house slave and me getting off the plantation completely. This is not the same thing. In fact, I would say that you actually ran into slavery and not into your kind of repadded new freedom. That's just, you're just lying. And which is actually to my second thing. They're pimps. They're just hardcore pimps. They're pimping the idea of liberation, and pimping not even so much in terms of sex work, but in terms of extracting all that is useful and good about liberation and extorting it and exploiting it for their own purposes that have nothing to do with those possible beneficiaries of liberation. You're calling liberation capitalism. You're calling liberation patriotism. In order to soil the best hopes of the enslaved people's dreams, and to destroy them, and to wrap it up with the feces of the state. That's what it is. You are taking the dreams of the people who actually knew what freedom was and wanted freedom, and you're drawing them back to the hell of your colonialist empire. That's what it is. That is a exploitation and extortion of what liberation is, to force it out and to perform what it wants to do, while you take all of the good of the connotation of liberation for your own dirty purposes.
Yeah, this section kind of reminds me of Dr. Joy James' lecture on the architects of abolition. She said, well, if you want me to build a coalition with you, I need to know your ideological stance. I'm not going to build a coalition on you based on precarity. This is kind of what this reminds me of this conversation right here, just because you have a way of getting liberation might be completely different from how I would see or vision my liberation, and liberation from my people.
Yeah, your liberation might be, okay, well, that master is better over there.
Right.
So let's go and hightail it over there. Well, you are a slave catcher.
Exactly.
It's basically what you are. You're just a slave catcher. That's not. You can't do this. You can't just make things up. You either are about anti-colonialism or you're not. And the whole regime of policing and surveillance is to remix our dreams and remix our sense of freedom so that it is there, so that it's in their pocket. And so if you're doing that yourself, you're just part of them. And this is why we should just say, well, that's like, I don't even believe in conversation with these people. I believe if you're actually for that, then fine. Just be the police that you are and leave me alone.
Just
real shit.
Leave me the hell alone.
Yeah, real shit. That's what I'm saying. I think slave catcher. I gotta call somebody that one day, but like that's really what we talking about, because it's like, yeah, like, and if that's how you feel, like you said, whatever, man, just leave. Like you said, leave me alone. Go your way. Because we're not going the same direction, and we might actually meet on both sides one day. So
I'm being peaceful by telling you to leave me alone.
Yeah. So it's just like, we're not going in the same direction. I think people have this kind of faux unity that they want sometimes, and I get it, but it's like, bro, if we certain things just don't mix. It just is what it is. Like, these certain things are diametrically opposed, and liberation can be whatever. It can be whatever you want it to mean in your own personal, individual sense. But in the real world, there is no liberation in slavery. Like, so I'm saying. So if you're saying that, then we need to materially dissect it for what it is. Like, this person is saying that we need a few black capitalists, or CBS would say chips in the cookie, to liberate the rest of us. Like, this person is saying that, And we have plenty of examples of that already happening and not working. So do y'all think that, I'm saying if I'm talking to other black people, like, you think that's liberation? Like, nah. So it's like, move on. But this person's trying to tell you that. So I'm saying, like, that's why it changed. I'm just thinking about coming back to change. Like it's just, it's so generic that we fill it in with whatever. We don't have to study. We don't really have to know what we're talking about. Or even if we do know what we're talking about, we don't have to say what we really mean. You know, because we know that people will just fill it in with some obscure thing. I mean, Ryan, you know, I've talked all the time. We used to joke about how you'll see like a Black History poster and it's got a bunch of black folks on it, you know, that never would have
agree with each other.
Never would have agreed. You know,
yeah.
and they just throw it up there like it's nothing. Yeah. I think I was on a pod. Somebody just pointed out to me that there was this in New York, Eric Adams, the mayor, and some cops took a picture in front of a mural that had like Assata Shakur and Malcolm X and a few other people literally behind them, you know, and the cops were mad, but like people didn't even see any kind of like contradiction. And it's like Eric Adams and Assata Shakur and Malcolm X have nothing in common. Like literally it ends with their skin. Nothing. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that kind of obscuring where it's just like, well, you know, they all want to change. You know what I'm saying? Like, or they were all going in the same direction. Just that's how you end up with, you know, well, this shit with the judge, and I'm gonna stop ranting, but like the, you know, where it's like the shirt that I saw out where, you know, Ruby Bridges, you know, try to integrate, and then they got like, you know, and then Kamala Harris became vice president, so Ketanji could rule. I'm like, what are y'all talking about? Like, so, or you get, you know, Dr. King, and there's a direct line drawn to Obama, and I'm like, in what world?
Yeah.
Or sometimes they even put Malcolm on there, which is even worse.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. And it's useful because now they paint our history. They take away our history and they give a false narrative and forced timeline, and then now our children are subjected to this being the true history of things.
Yeah.
Saying that Ketanji can rule. Rule what? Rule who? Rule why? What is happening here? The whole thing is just like so ridiculous that it's just very stressful in general. Yeah.
All right. Deterrence. You said deterrence. This is one that people don't hear as often, but I think it's a key one. So deterrence, which liberals claim is necessary to scare would-be criminals away from harming others, offers a specter of torture and intimidation as a tool of social regulation. And you also say to avoid it, black defense to police and historically anti-black social order they are sworn to protect is demanded. One must show respect and not misbehave to not be violated. A centuries-old method of enforcing anti-black control in settler colonies. So, as a question, does the state deter its own violence, or what is it trying to quote-unquote deter?
Yeah, I think the spectacle of the whipping post endures in the colony to the present moment. The prison is operating as a whipping post. The parole and all aspects of the judicial system, including Ketanji, is operating as the whipping post. And so this is how you are supposed to have a smooth and orderly transplantation, a well-ordered police state, by showing the whipping post in people's lives in general, so that people in Harlem from 8 years old and up or earlier know very well that if you do this, then you're going to be thrown into a dungeon and lose all types of rights and experience violence and disgusting conditions. That situation is what is to order the plantation and to make it all run smoothly. And of course, there is no deterrent to have the state continue. There's no deterrent to that violence. There's no deterrent to continuously, because the state is not just like this thing that exists. Every day they keep on doing it. It's not just like, okay, it happened or whatever. Every day they keep on doing it. And so tomorrow, They have the choice of not doing it, but they want to continue to do it. But what is the deterrent for them to not continue to do it? Nothing, because people have been produced as pliant objects that have been scared by the spectacle of that whipping post. So the mere fact that social order is regulated by the stripping of Black people's backs, the stripping of the marginalized and lumber proletariat's backs, that in itself shows what is the nature of the regulatory order. What is it that is being ordered? How the system or state is being all right, and how the society is being organized. It is in itself evident. Like deterrence is even moving away from the problem. The fact that it is a whipping post to order a totalitarian state is in itself evidence of the problem. But we are so deep into it, we think that maybe in order to not murder, we should be aware of that whipping post that is always in the outskirts of our mind. Well, if a deterrent did matter, then the question is, what is it that will deter the state from reproducing itself tomorrow?
Mm. Yeah, I think you often hear this term, and this is where you really got to put it in the scope of police, because that's usually where you hear it used. Maybe some people haven't heard it, but like they talk about how the police are taking a deterrence model, like as in we are trying to prevent crime. So, and some even will say that the police as a body exists to deter crime, right? So, and again, crime, air quotes for those listening. So by the existence of the police or by their presence, it's here to deter people from harming others. That's their claim. Or it's here to or just the general, like even certain policies are supposed to deter certain kinds of behavior, from occurring. So if we suspend kids in school, we'll deter more Black boys from misbehaving in school by suspending them. Now, obviously, the most basic look at stats, that's not what's happening. You just keep suspending them, and then they end up in prison, and the story goes. So it's like deterrence, like that's why I was asking, does the state deter its own violence? Because ultimately, like they use that rationalization that we're trying to deter a certain type of behavior, so we can always justify being here, and always justify the violence, more guns, bigger budgets, all of those things helps justify the kind of continued expansion of the state, because we got to deter these wild people, these super predators. We gotta deter that from existence.
Yeah, the logic of every lynching is deterrence. The logic of every single lynching is deterrence. When you are disrespectful or when you steal a chicken, you get burned alive because we want to make sure that everybody else realizes that you're not supposed to be rolling your eyes or stealing chicken. That is to say nothing about, because it's not so much to say that, okay, it didn't work. People are still stealing chickens and rolling their eyes. One, there's two levels. One, the fact that this is a reasonable form of punishment, is in itself indicative of the nature of the colony, and whether on that basis alone it's something that should continue to exist. But for the punishment of the crime, which is stealing the chicken or rolling your eyes, those crimes that are being deterred, the fact that people are stealing chickens or are being punished for stealing chickens, and that being something that needs to be policed, just like disrespect, as they would call it, that needing to be policed, shows the totalitarian nature and exploitative and forced starvation nature of this thing that you've created. So your punishment is enough reason for you to question its existence, but also the thing you're punishing is enough reason to existence. Remember, the people who are in the native sector all over the world are always experiencing more horizontal violence, more sister-to-sister, brother-to-brother violence that exists everywhere, whether it is colonized Ireland, colonized Kenya, or colonized Harlem. It's the same thing everywhere. So it's not something specific to any type of one situation or one type of people. So your expressive society creates the conditions of, as it's been seen almost by scientific or social law, the fact of horizontal violence, of the native quarters violence. Fanon says that when the colonizer cannot attack, when the colonized cannot attack the colonist, he turns his machete to his brother. This is exactly what has been happening pretty much everywhere. So, but to use the fact that we are in the situation of turning our machetes to our brother as a reason to lynch us, to put us into their roach infested torture chambers. This is in itself evidence of both not only the fact that it is not punishing right, but that their logic for punishment is wrong. So the logic of what can be punished is wrong. So from the bottom to the top, the entirety of the thing, there's no element, no inch of it that is okay. The punishment, the police, and the crime, and the logic, and the talking about it, all of it needs to be thrown on the ash heap of history.
Feared for his life. Fear for his life is a license, a flashed badge. Society does not need to believe the statement. They only need it to be said. To check that the documents which prove they have a right to killing are in order. What is being implied by fear?
On one level, it's just the black savage or the native savage and the white innocent. And so, yeah, that's there. But also, I think fear, or the announcement of personal fear, white men announcing personal fear, is something that is very new in the colonial period. Because in the 1920s and 1930s, in colonies everywhere, it was a demonstration of arms akimbo and the sang-froid, I am powerful and I could do anything to any native. It was never, I can say that, I will say that I am scared for my life. This is a actual new adjustment in modern colonialism that happened. I don't know exactly when it happened. It seems to have happened from the 1950s on, type of thing. Definitely from the 1960s in this colony. And so its newness in itself seems to be an interesting transition in colonial power, colonial language. But I think part of the thing that I'm saying here is that it's not even so much what fear is implying. It's that fear is in itself a license, that there's nothing else that needs to be thought, nothing else that needs to be understood. You say fear and you can kill. Fear is your literal license to kill. I fear this, so I can kill that. And only they have that. It's never us that are living in the terror of their state, have the license to kill widespread and do widespread violence. That's never even fathomable. But they, and all they need to do is to kill anyone, is to say that they fear. And the chances of them being okay after is almost perfect. And so it's one thing to be able to talk about, oh yes, we're playing into tropes of the black savage and the black criminal and the white innocence. But beyond that, what about this, I have the right to kill by saying I fear? Just, you don't even have to like act fear. You can just say I fear it. And that in itself is the right to lynching. Before it wasn't like this, now it's not. So now they've just had another like free card of violence that they haven't before. It's the sophistication of colonialism rather than anything else.
Yeah, I think with fear, I think what you're saying, I hear what you're saying as far as like it's the first time that they've announced their fears openly, because you can go back and read the fears of slave masters. You know, I've been reading Horne's work on of confronting black Jacobins or whatever, and like you can read the fear of slave masters about rebellion and about revolution, like particularly talking about Haiti. Like they're very fearful. That's something we get to look back in history and see like their internal conversations with each other. But the announcement of fear openly, you know, that is a fairly newer phenomenon. Like that's my, like you said, that's my badge. You know, versus them just saying like, because you go up and look at what like Thomas Jefferson, and then they're literally worried that Haiti is gonna like invade the South. Like this is a real fear, but they're not gonna come in Congress and say that, right? They're gonna say we need to protect our interests or some bullshit, right? You know, like they're not gonna say like, you know, we need to. This is strategic, by all the kind of geopolitical language you'll hear. But there was always this, so there's always like this fear of this like black rage like rising up and overtaking the colony. But now it's like you could actually use that as a rationalization openly. You know, like you can actually say
it up anymore.
Right. Yeah. You can say like, you know, it's like you said, it really is a badge. It's like, okay, I'm scared now. I can do what I want to really do. You don't even have to actually be scared, though. That's the thing. Like, the fear doesn't even really have to be the thing for the cop, as opposed to with the slave owner. These people really were scared. The cop doesn't even have to really feel any sense of fear. I mean, you have cops who say they would fear for their life when people are running away. You know, so clearly nobody's telling the truth about fear, because I don't know who's scared of somebody running away from them. I don't even understand that kind of logic. You know, whether they're armed or not, I don't understand. I'm scared of somebody running away from me. And why I would have the justification to shoot somebody running away from me, you know? So it's like, you know, so fear really is just like this thing where it's like, okay, now I said it. And because that paranoia that always existed that we're talking about amongst the population, you can always use that as a rationalization, because they are like, well, these are some beasts, you know, these are some wild animals. These are some, so I understand why he'd be fearful. Like he's, you know, you always hear a cop's job is so hard, even though it's actually not a very dangerous job. A cop's job is so hard, and they put their lives on the line for us every day. Like there's all this mystique and, you know, created around them that all you got to do is just buzz in fear, to your point, and you do what you want, you know. So and the courts, the courts, the Constitution, everything is there set up, you know, for you to move on. And it takes the most egregious situation, like a George Floyd, for people to be like, okay, how are you scared of somebody whose neck you were sitting on for 10 minutes? Like, how are you scared of this person?
Right.
You know, like it takes something that ridiculous for people to be like, okay, well, maybe we should, you know, as we'll get to later, hold them accountable. You know?
Yeah. So it's their passport to travel like that. You flash that passport, you go over the door. Because like I'm a little more mean. I don't even know if it's their rationalizing of the problem, or their ability to rationalize killing people through the use of fear. And I don't necessarily even believe that it's the paranoia of the crowd to be like, yes, because of this exists, but I don't think it's there from the vast majority of the time. I think what really is happening is, this is why I don't have conversation with them, and I suggest not to speak to them at all, because we get wrapped up in their thinking. Or their pretended thinking. I think they're just lying. I think that the colonizer or the police is saying, I feared. And the audience who's saying, oh yeah, he might fear for his life. I think they're lying too. I think they're both lying.
I guess what I mean by rationalization is that's the front that they got to put on. Like that's the front that.
But I don't think they got to put it on. I think it's just simply like this. It's just like, I'm gonna kill this black person. Here I'm going to show my ID card, which is fair, and then moving on. And everybody's like, oh, the audience who sees that says, oh, you show the ID patch, move on. There's no more cerebral process that happens after that. We almost need to believe that there is this more human, more rationalized sense, that there is this thing that they have to do in order to make it logic. I don't even think it reaches that point. And again, this is me being mean, and maybe too mean. But I don't think it reaches that point. I generally believe that there are not a lot of people that are actually sitting at home watching police violence and saying, you know what, he did fear for life, and in their heart of hearts actually believing that. No, they're like, he said fair. He said fair, guys. He said fair, okay, so get off me. He said fair, he could kill them. And the police is like, I said fair, though. I said fair, so get off me, I can kill him. That's what I think is happening. And so fair is almost operating as a license rather than anything more complicated.
Yeah, like a literal get out of jail card.
Yeah, I guess for me it's almost like it's like the rationalization and the fear, or the badge, I should say, it's like one and the same. Kind of like we were talking about with the cake or whatever. It's not that there's any real moral conflict, you know. I'm not suggesting that, you know, but I'm saying the badge is the rationalization. The all of these things are the badge is the rationalization, and the rationalization is the badge. Like it's one and the same.
Yeah.
It's to say that I have to have some, because even the badge is a cover. So you're like, he says fear. That's the cover that they can at least sell back to the colonized people who most of the time don't really buy it. I mean, even that most average person doesn't buy it, but it gives something, to your point about ideology, to stand in front of what just really happened. You know, you shot him, period. You know, but now we talking about fear. You know, we're talking about whatever some psychological thing that nobody can even prove, right? Like now we're going over what the cop has to deal with and how hard the job is. It stands in front of us just dealing with the fact that you shot him. So I'm not saying, like, again, that it's a rationalization in the sense that they're trying to make the food go down easier or something like that. You know, like I'm not saying that they can take the pill straight, but it's a way to keep the cloak of this whole thing that we got going on. You know, as opposed to just saying, like, you know, this is just what cops do, you know, so be it. Because they at least have to flash a badge. They don't just go do it. And they always have to present some story. There's an investigation. You know, they always have to have that cloak of shit. Otherwise, it's just like I think you said when you were on the last episode, it's just, the police are just people with guns running around shooting people. If we just saw it as that, then there's nothing, you know, there's nothing there. So all of this other stuff stands in the way of just being like, you shot somebody, and what gives you the power to do it? You know,
it almost seems like that badge, that license is just part of the process, right? You just like you said, flash it, boom, go on to the next thing. Next person get killed, flash it, I fear for life, boom. And this license, this badge, this rationalization that goes with it is never extended to the colonized. I think you mentioned that in the article. A person who get shot by the police or shoot at the police can never claim, I'm feared for my life. It's like, no. It's not how that works.
I remember I wrote a piece when we did it on this pod here in Indianapolis when Drajon Reed got killed, and he literally was running from the police, and he had a gun on him, and they claim that before he got shot, he turned around, pulls his gun out, aims it at the cop, and then the cop was like, click, clack. And we were watching this on Facebook Live. Like, I was actually watching this when this happened. And they'll claim that is, you know, a rationalization. But I'm like, even if we accept their story, you're chasing me with a gun. Why shouldn't I turn around and shoot back? You know what I'm saying? Like even if we accept the story, even if we don't try to prove innocence, he's running, you're chasing me with a gun. In any other scenario, it would make perfect sense for the person being chased to turn around with a gun and shoot back because you have a gun too. In any other scenario, but only because it's a cop.
Even in the video. Yeah. And even in the video while he's driving, he's like, you know, I'm sorry, Mom. You know, he's kind of just, he's kind of just, this is my fate.
Yeah, you know, accepting the inevitable end to a white supremacist gang member. I'm running after you with a gun, and the impunity that is surely to follow that white supremacist gang member. You resign yourself to that fate, and that's the situation that we're in. Which is another reason why I think it's time to stop speaking to them. Stop showing why the rationalization is messed up. Stop showing why this is ridiculous. They have decided what they want. It's a hard thing to admit, it's a hard thing to accept, but they have decided it. And it's time that we've actually accepted that no, there is no more persuasive argument that we can come up with. There's no more genius argument that we can come up with, because they want this. And if we're in a situation where they want it, then the next step is, what is our next move? Because once we accept that they want this, then there is no more need to be able to kind of try to persuade them, because that's not what they want. They want something else. They want this situation.
Yeah. All right, so that was part one. It was a pretty long discussion, so we knocked out, I believe, 6 terms. We have 9 more to go through. So again, I would encourage everybody to read the piece, because he writes about each one pretty extensively, and read it in concert with our discussion so you can be ready for next week. But thank you, everybody, for coming through. Again, if you can afford to, and if you are graceful enough, we will take any contributions to the Patreon. But regardless of that, we appreciate everybody for listening and continuing to support the show. We hope that you learn that the quote unquote system cannot be broken in the way that it's framed, because it was not set up in a sense that was supposed to work for us in the first place. And hopefully we went even deeper beyond some of the cliches around that as well. So thank you everybody for listening. Peace out.
Hey y'all, and if you have any comments or just thoughts on episodes to come, feel free to just leave us a review and rate the show and tell us how you feel.